Welcome to XYPN Radio, where your host Alan Moore brings you into a community of fee-only financial planners who want to profitably and successfully serve Gen X and Gen Y clients. If you're ready to get the knowledge you need from leaders in your field, learn from forward-thinking advisors, and take action on your own goals, XYPN Radio is the show for you. Here's your host.
Hello and welcome to this episode of XYPN Radio. I am your host, Alan Moore, and today I'm excited to have my XYPN co-founder, Michael Kitces, back on the show today to talk about being fee-only, being a fiduciary, and why it matters. We get a lot of questions about the definition of fee-only, what it really means, why we encourage advisors to go fee-only and drop the commissions, and why we require all advisors joining XYPN to be fee-only and sign a fiduciary oath. Well, what better way to get an answer than hear us rant about it? We love doing these Unhinged episodes, and in this episode, you'll hear us address all of these questions and more. So if you're on the fence about being fee-only or wondering why you can't sell life insurance and remain a fiduciary to your clients, then this episode is for you. You can find any of the additional resources that we mentioned during the episode at xyplanningnetwork.com/127. Also, be sure to go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP to join our private group just for XYPN Radio listeners. It's the community of advisors we've all been looking for that's there to provide support when we need it the most. Best of all, it's free. I encourage you to check it out. Again, that's xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP. Without further ado, here is our episode with Michael. Hey, Michael, welcome back to the show, man. Thanks so much for being on.
I'm glad to be back. It's been a little while, so I'm looking forward to jumping back into the mailbag here.
So because of the way we're actually posting the episodes, which is sometimes different than the order in which they are recorded, we had our benchmarking survey discussion go live about 2 weeks ago, I believe, at the time that this will go live. So people are hearing from us. We heard some questions about doing more mailbag episodes. And so we wanted to do, this one's going to be a little different. I'm going to call this one an in-between your typical Alan and Michael, or Alan and Kitces, I guess, Unhinged episode where we truly mailbag, sort of an in-between that and a discussion around a specific topic. So we're going to do, we'll call it mailbag with a theme. And that theme is the term fee-only.
I've heard of that term.
Yeah, once or twice, right? It comes up. We get tons of questions, and we're going to talk about all of this, but we get tons of questions around why XY Planning Network requires advisors to be fee-only to join, what it means, how it's interpreted, what are the changes that are coming, and all of that. So we're going to dig into sort of all of these pieces that we hear come up around fee-only and why we feel it's important and why we've chosen to make it a requirement to join XY Planning Network, which certainly limits the number of advisors that can join. But before we jump in, I do want to have a quick discussion and just sort of lay the foundation for the definition of fee-only. So there have been some changes in the definition, and we can talk about some changes that may or may not be coming as well. But, technically NAPFA, the National Association of Personal Financial Advisors, are the ones who I guess, created and popularized. They used to have the trademark on the term fee-only. They apparently let that lapse for some reason back in the 90s. But they started sort of this definition. It has evolved over time as more advisors have adopted it. And now the CFP board, 5-6 years ago, adopted its sort of definition of fee-only, which was actually different than NAPFA's, which has caused an immense amount of confusion. We don't have to dig in too much to that, but I'm just going to read the definition of fee-only because I think this is extremely confusing for advisors. So this is straight from the CFP board's website. Fee-only. A certificant, or CFP, may describe his or her practice as fee-only if and only if all of the certificate's compensation from all of his or her client work comes exclusively from the clients in the form of fixed, flat, hourly, percentage, or performance fee-based.
So that's long, just because there's a lot of stuff in there, but I don't feel like that's actually that confusing. Like at the end of the day, it says you are fee only if and only if all of your compensation from all of your stuff, from all the things you do for clients are only fees.
Correct. Now that would be fine if, I think the confusing part comes in, well, I'm fee only because I only accept fees as a certificate. All of my compensation comes in the form of fees and no commissions. But my business partner sells insurance. So this is where you have to say, you have to look and it says, in this definition of fee only, all of these certificates compensation. Okay, so then you have to go look up the definition of compensation in the CFP board's definition tree. And compensation is defined as any non-trivial economic benefit, whether monetary or non-monetary, that a certificant or related party receives or is entitled to receive for providing professional activities. So this is the part I think that trips people up, is because they say, well, I'm fee only. I only accept fees, but other people in my business, don't accept fees. They accept commission. So why does it matter? And this is where it matters, is because it's not just your compensation. It's the compensation for you and all related parties, which I'm not sure. I couldn't find a definition of related parties according to the CFP board, but it is pretty broad. I think it's, spouse, business partners, anybody inside the firm. So it truly is a firm level definition. Fee only is not an advisor level definition. It's a firm level definition, which I think is what is really tripping people up whenever we get into this conversation around what is fee only and what does it mean and why does it matter?
Right. Well, because, think about it, right? If you didn't consider related parties, then you can quickly make the whole nature of fee only entirely irrelevant, right? Like, I'm fee only, and then I also own a commission business that I refer all my clients to. So, okay, so you're not fee only. I'm fee only, but I have a business partner who does all the commission work, and then we share on the profits. And we didn't share on the commissions, but we own the business together and we share on the profits. Well, guess where the profits come from?
From the commissions.
The commissions that I refer to my business partner, right? And you can quickly go down this road. And I think the challenge to some extent is because it's almost impossible to untangle the messy webs of related parties. CFP board, I think somewhat justifiably has essentially said, look, if you're affiliated to a commission-based business, we have to assume that there are commissions there that you do, or at least could at any point, benefit from. Right? Like, oh, I'm fee only at my broker-dealer, but then there's another broker in my office that does all the commission-based business, and then our branch manager gives us bonuses if our branch production is good. Well, great, our branch production is good because you referred commission-based business to your other rep in the branch from your quote-unquote fee-only clients. Like that's kind of the origin and nature of why the CFP board, I think justifiably to some extent, takes a hard line around related parties. And it's not that you couldn't probably come up with some legitimate way to have a related party that's like really, really independent and not that related, and it's okay. But you have to look at it essentially from a regulator's perspective, because at this point, CFP board is a quasi-regulator. There's 80,000 CFP certificates. They can't individually analyze 80,000 individual certificate situations. You have to draw some lines and rules. That's how regulation works. And so the way they drew the line is if you have a related party that can get commissions, then you can't call yourself fee only because you could benefit indirectly by sending the commissions to your related party.
Yeah, and there's a spectrum here, right? There's on one end of the spectrum, and there have been lawsuits, with the CFP board over this, is where, I own both a financial planning firm and an insurance company, and I'm referring business between the two. And I say I do fee-only financial planning, but I do commission insurance sales. Now, the CFP board has determined we call that fee and commission. But some people want to say, well, I do fee-only planning because I also own a commission business, but I don't, but that entity gets the commissions.
And frankly, that was the original and real purpose of these rules, was specifically to prevent that, where someone says, no, I only do fee only for my financial plans, and then my other business does all the commissions. Like, no, the client came to you. You may tie to multiple businesses, but the client came to you, and if you're getting compensated through multiple businesses and multiple channels, but you're getting paid for generating fees and generating commissions, then you need to disclose both. And it's not, particularly in the CFP board's context, this was never to say fees are good and commissions are bad. Obviously, there are some other people out there that have that discussion and make that debate. And I know we're going to talk about it a little bit more here, but to their defense, at least, CFP board really adjudicates from a compensation neutral perspective. They're not writing rules to say commissions are bad and fees are good. The rules they're writing simply say, if you're going to explain yourself to consumers as being fee only, you have to actually
be honest in your compensation disclosures. So on one end of the spectrum is that where it's just clearly not okay, right? Clearly not fee only. Probably somewhere in the middle of the spectrum are advisors that are truly only earning fees, but there are other advisors at their firm that are selling annuities or have trails or whatnot. And they're getting caught up in this firm level definition of fee only, even if they feel like, well, I'm doing the right thing. I'm a fiduciary. I'm fee only, when someone else at the firm is not. And then the far end of the spectrum, which are the folks that unfortunately got caught up in the middle of some of this, is like, well, I'm a fee only advisor and my wife sells real estate. And so therefore she's a related party. So therefore I can't call myself fee only, even though there is truly no overlap. And to see if, that is what it is. But I think most advisors that get caught up in this are somewhere in the middle. I don't think, and those are the ones that come to us and say, well, I feel like I'm fee only. What do you mean I'm not fee only? And I think part of the problem too is that we have, in our industry, we have made fee only and fiduciary synonymous, and they are not. So that's another thing I want to talk about is why we use those terms interchangeably and why that may or may not technically be appropriate. So part of the challenge, and I've heard you talk about this several times, is that you truly cannot be a fiduciary to your client if you have a broker-dealer relationship.
Yeah, and that's not necessarily about a commissions versus not discussion. That's just literally like when you are working for a broker-dealer, you have to write on your business card, so-and-so is a registered representative of such and such broker-dealer. They make you put that disclosure on everything. It's on your business card. It's on your website. It's on all your stuff. And it's quite literal that the reason they make you put it there is because truly you are not your own financial advisor. You are not your own independent agent. You are a registered representative of the broker-dealer. You are literally their salesperson. That's the nature of the broker role and why you operate as a registered representative of the firm. You are operating on their behalf, and their business is to broker and to deal. That's why they're called broker-dealers. That's how they get paid and they make their money. And the reason why that matters is when you are a registered representative of a broker-dealer, your obligation, first and foremost, is to your broker-dealer. You have an obligation to the firm that you work for. If you violate that obligation, they have the right to fire you. And so it becomes impossible in kind of a literal sense to execute a fiduciary duty to a client where you put the client's interests first when you work for a broker-dealer, because if you don't put your broker-dealer's interests first, you will be fired, or you can be fired. It is a terminable offense. Now, when you're on the RIA side, the reason why RIAs are different, because technically the structure is actually the same. When you work under an RIA, you are an IAR, an investment advisor representative of an RIA. That's what you get to be when you take your Series 65. For some solo advisors, they are the IAR of their own RIA because they're kind of one and the same when you're a solo. But technically, you're a rep when you work for an RIA as well. The distinction is, in an RIA environment, the client's agreement with the firm is a fiduciary agreement because the RIA as an entity owes a fiduciary duty to the client. That's part of the Investment Advisors Act. When a client signs a brokerage account agreement with a broker-dealer, which is functionally the binding contract, there's no fiduciary obligation from a broker-dealer attached to a brokerage account. And so as long as you are obligated as a registered rep to represent a non-fiduciary entity, you can't literally operate as a fiduciary. And that's not to say that you can't do your best to try to act in your client's interest, and that many broker-dealers don't also try to do the right thing for the client because it's just generally good for business for obvious reasons. But you don't have to, and you're not obligated to. And almost all of us, if you've been in the business for any period of time, you have seen some really, really crappy stuff that's been done to other clients by other advisors and registered reps, not us that are listening to this, but other people. And the fact that what they did is completely legal and completely permissible and not punishable just kind of reinforces the fact that they're not operating as fiduciaries. They don't have any obligation to. And if you even try, you will quickly find that there are a lot of conflicts that arise between what you may want to do as a rep and what your broker-dealer allows you to do. And frankly, I think a lot of the movement from broker-dealers to RIAs is that shift and that desire of people saying, well, I want to do the right things for my client. And frankly, I'm kind of tired of the limitations the broker dealer is putting on me. And that's a challenge that I think a lot of broker dealers are trying to change for themselves in figuring out what their future is.
Yeah, this is part of the frustration, I think, for advisors when they hear like, oh, well, I have to be fee only. And they think, well, I always work in my client's best interest. And, it's always interesting to me to talk to attorneys about their fiduciary obligations to clients and to see just how far we are from that world. I mean, you and I were working with an attorney firm helping form filing some LLC paperwork. And they have to run a fiduciary conflict of interest check through their system to be sure that they don't have any conflicts of interest that exist. And if they do, they don't work with us. I mean, not even like whether or not they're going to work in our best interest. They're going so far as to say if they could possibly have a conflict of interest because there's one person that they've worked with in the past or litigated on behalf of or against as part of something else. And it could be a different attorney inside the same umbrella firm, that they can't work with us or they have to put certain things in place or certain disclosures. The fact that, anyway, attorneys are just so far ahead of us when it comes to fiduciary and working our client's best interest. But fee only and fiduciary are not synonymous. Now, you make a good point on, if you're with a broker dealer, your fiduciary responsibility is to your broker dealer. And this is where it gets really weird when you have an RIA relationship and a broker dealer relationship because you're a hybrid. And I always liken it to like you have two hats. You have a advice hat and a sales hat. And when you have on the RIA advice hat, you're a fiduciary. But then at any time you can switch hats and put on your sales, I now work for the broker dealer, no longer a fiduciary hat. And you can go between the two. I think you need $1 million in life insurance. That's advice. That's fiduciary. And now I'm going to sell you a 30-year term life insurance policy. Now all of a sudden I'm a salesperson. I'm no longer a fiduciary. And it's this very strange thing that we allow in financial services. But the one I think that trips people up is insurance. So broker-dealer makes a little more sense. But do you really have a fiduciary obligation to an insurance company if you are a rep that sells insurance, both either as a captive agent or as a broker? Or can you sell insurance in a fiduciary manner?
Well, so a few things. One, just important clarification on terms. Fiduciary kind of by its definition means act in the best interest of the client. The relationship that you have to a broker-dealer is technically an agency relationship, a representative relationship. It's not a fiduciary relationship. And the whole point is fiduciary means you have to act in the client's interest. Agency relationship means you have to act in the interest of the group you represent, not the clients, the group you represent. And yeah, insurance agents have the same problem. In fact, it's kind of implied in the name. They're an insurance agent. I mean, again, we've kind of word jumbled what we call people these days. We threw everything into the giant financial advisor blender and everyone's putting the same names on the business card. But the actual root terms were way more descriptive than we ever gave them credit to be. Or maybe that's actually why they went away, because they were so descriptive what they were. A registered representative of a broker-dealer is a salesperson representing a sales organization. An insurance agent is quite literally an agent of the insurance company, not an agent of the client, an agent of the insurance company. That's why it says insurance agent. That's why you have to take an exam to be licensed as an insurance agent. And so the same issue and the same problem crops up in the context of the insurance agency. And, if you're unclear on that, try working for any captive insurance agency and see what happens if you sell a different company's life insurance policy, and watch how quickly you get fired, right? We even call legal. It's selling away, right? We have a technical legal term for not acting in the best interests of the company you represent. It's called selling away. It's the same reason why your broker-dealer oversees all of your outside activity. They have both selling away limitations and they supervise your outside business activities. Why? Because you're primarily their salesperson. And so they want to know what else you're doing as an outside activity because you represent the broker-dealer. So it gives them the right actually to oversee what you're doing as outside business activities while you're representing the firm as their salesperson. And so it's just the nature of these roles and what they are.
So agent makes sense, right? Because you're captive. And captive insurance agents are folks like State Farm, Allstate. Some of the big companies tend to sell their own products. But what about a broker that can act on behalf of Principal, Guardian, MetLife, SBLI. I mean, why can't I broker insurance in a fiduciary way? Or can I? And the CFP board has simply said, that may not be fee only, but you can be a fiduciary doing it.
Yeah, you can get closer to it in a true broker context on the insurance side. That's difficult for the broker dealer end because we kind of use the word broker, but the company is actually the broker is doing the brokerage. You are still representing the company. The insurance side, just because of the regulatory structure, it's a little more feasible to actually be a true independent insurance broker, is appointed with multiple companies and licensed to do business with their products, but you can have freedom to choose amongst the products, which cuts down on the extent of the conflict of interest compared to you literally have to represent your company first. But still, the fundamental challenge is when you're in a world where insurance policies may pay 50 or 100% of, like 50% of target premium on a permanent policy or 100% of first year premium on a term policy. When you're getting paid those commissions, it's really hard for anyone to be confident that if the best advice is actually, you really shouldn't buy any of these insurance policies from me at all, just don't buy any insurance. It's really hard to give that recommendation when the only way you get paid is to sell the insurance policy. And it's a very large check when you do. And so that at least becomes the fiduciary conflict and the fiduciary challenge, right? There are lots of conflicts of interest that arise in a fiduciary nature. One of them is simply, can you represent the client's best interest, or do you actually have a legal obligation to the company? But the second is, do you have a compensation model that just itself is so inherently conflicted, it would be very difficult for anyone to just walk away from the business if the right thing to tell the client was, just don't buy this insurance from me. I know you want to. You think you want to. I'm going to tell you it's bad and that you shouldn't. That's difficult to do when the only way you get paid is to sell them the thing and do the business with them.
And I think it's fair to take one step back and to say that, like, you nor I have anything against commissions or people that sell on commissions. We have a thing against people that sell inappropriate products on commission, but I've got a thing against fee-only advisors that don't do a good job and charge a fee for it too. Like we just have a thing against people that are not doing the right thing.
Yeah, I don't. Incompetence is bad across any channel in any context. You screw people up different ways when you don't know what you're doing and you do a bad job. But all of them screw people up and are not good. The problem, and I mean the piece that ultimately is the challenge for me is simply, if you go back to the roots of just where all this regulation for advisors comes from. So broker dealers are under one set of rules. Registered investment advisors are under another. The whole nature of the RIA was created under what was called the Investment Advisors Act of 1940, so 7 years ago. And the rules that got created, even when we put that structure in place, we actually created two separate channels. They were broker dealers with salespeople who sold brokerage products. That was their business. And then there were registered investment advisors who got paid fees for giving advice. And that was the separation. Those were the two different channels. And in fact, there was even a rule written into the original Investment Advisors Act that said, if you're at a broker dealer and you give advice that is anything more than, quote, solely incidental to the sale of brokerage products, then you have to go register as an investment advisor and be subject to the Investment Advisors Act and what ultimately is a fiduciary duty attached to RIAs. The fiduciary actually came a little bit later than the original law in 1940, but it was sort of a fiduciary-like law that became full fiduciary later. But we created these separate channels. Advisors gave advice and got paid fees and were subject to fiduciary duty. And salespeople sold products and got paid commissions, because frankly, that's how almost every sales business works and always has for a long time. So we had these separate channels. Advisors gave advice and got paid fees. Brokers sold, and insurance agents sold products and got paid commissions, because those are just the natural compensation mechanisms for those channels. The part where it's gotten messy is over the past 20 years. At some point, we threw out the registered rep and the insurance agent labels They're still buried somewhere down there on the bottom of a business card usually, but the top of the business card and the top of the website says financial advisor, financial consultant. We help you. We give you advice to your financial future, but are legally still operating as salespeople. And again, it's not to say that some salespeople don't give very good advice. Many do, but from the consumer end and from the consumer protection end, it's a real problem when consumers can't tell the difference between advisors and salespeople because the salespeople say they're in the advice business. Hightower Advisors had a video that went viral a couple of years ago that basically made the point, like, if you want good diet advice, you don't go to a butcher because the butcher just sells meat.
Right. That's
what they do. And we don't begrudge the butcher for selling meat. If you go to a butcher and you didn't expect to get meat, you were kind of messed up in the head. Like, they're a butcher. That's what they do. But if butchers were all running dietitian shops and then all they sold was meat, there would clearly be a problem here. And you wouldn't really expect to get good dietary advice from a butcher. The problem is that is the world we live in the advisory realm, where we have people that are legally salespeople, operate as salespeople, registered as salespeople, but holding out that they're giving advice. And maybe some of them will be good advice. I'm sure there are a couple of butchers out there who just have a knack for dietitian knowledge and can actually give really good advice about what to eat for balanced, healthy nutrition. But you don't go to butchers for diet advice. And you run the risk anytime you go to a salesperson and ask for advice. And in most contexts, we kind of know, right? Like when I go to the Gap and someone says that those jeans look good on you, I understand they work on commission and I have to take that those jeans look really good on you with a grain of salt. The challenge in our industry though is we've mixed all of these salespeople and advisors together and we've done it so long that again, I think part of why this aggravates people or why it feels so offensive to some is they've lived it themselves unwittingly. Like they came into the business to be advisors. They have operated as advisors all along with full intent to be advisors and help their clients. They're doing it in a sales organization, right? They're doing it under a broker-dealer. And so they feel very offended, I think justifiably, when someone comes in and says, no, you're not an advisor, you're a salesperson. And they said, no, I'm an advisor. It says on my business card, I've been doing it for 3 years or 5 years or 10 years or 15 years. And the problem is, well, no, further down the business card, it actually says you're a registered representative operating as a salesperson for the broker-dealer. Like we've even, unfortunately, kind of fooled ourselves, I think, a little bit because, or I shouldn't say fooled ourselves, confused ourselves about where you can be an advisor and where you can't because the labels are that confused. I mean, if we can't tell which jobs are advisor jobs and which jobs are salespeople jobs in our own industry, no wonder consumers are confused and can't figure out the good advisors from the bad advisors.
Yeah, you bring up a couple great points in there, and you know, I think the crux of the issue is the fact that consumers and studies have shown that consumers believe that their advisor is a fiduciary even when they're not. And I'm trying to remember the exact numbers.
Which is the nature of advice. Like, how do you give advice that's not in the interest of the person receiving advice? It's kind of the definition of what makes it advice, right? We all just presume it. How can you not give advice that is meant for the person receiving the advice? It's just the nature of the label. The problem is it's coming from someone who is legally a salesperson representing a company that sells products.
And that's where the issue is. And I know some folks will approach that and say, hey, buyer beware. I'm trying to remember my Latin caveat emptor.
Caveat emptor.
You know, buyer beware. They should go figure out if their advisor is really an advisor. And from the other end of it, having seen so many of these situations go badly for so many very smart people, you just have to understand that we have intentionally confused consumers. Like we didn't do this by accident. I mean, this is something that you as the advisor may not have done this purposefully, but you better believe there's a reason that broker-dealers have moved into calling themselves financial planners, financial advisor, wealth manager, wealth consultant. They don't call themselves stockbrokers anymore. It's not a good term anymore. And that has been an intentional shift, but it has muddied the waters. And my definition of fiduciary is, for the advisor out there that says, I act in a fiduciary manner. Now, I act in a fiduciary manner is different than I am a fiduciary. So I am a fiduciary means you can sign a fiduciary oath, which we'll talk about here in a bit, but XY Plan Network makes all of our advisors sign a fiduciary oath that when they join that says they will always act in the best interest of their clients at all times. No caveats, no ifs, ands, or buts, always. It's very clear. So I am a fiduciary. Now you can say I act in a fiduciary manner, which is what a lot of folks that are registered reps will say, because they say, look, I may be able to earn a commission, but I will tell my client what they need to do. I will give them good advice. I will not try to sell them whole life insurance. I'll sell them the term policy because that's what's best for them. And the truth is, you touched on this, but like that may be your focus and that may be your commitment. But you cannot say that you are a fiduciary or that you work in a fiduciary manner if your client cannot sue you for breaking that promise.
And that's why some of these labels, as well as just the actual legal aspects of fiduciary, matter, right? Because if fiduciary is that trustworthy of a term, then it's not hard to imagine the good sales strategy for like a really, really scummy salesperson. I mean, think of the worst person out there that sells the worst crap, the highest, like the stuff we all would universally agree, this was a bad sale. This was a bad thing to do to someone. But if they come in and they say, I'm a fiduciary, I give advice, it says financial advisor on my business card, and they look the client straight in the face and say, this is the right thing for your financial future, and they convince the client to sign off on it with a 47-page disclosure attached, and they can prove to someone that it was not unsuitable, it is legally defensible. There's no accountability. There's no consequences. They said, yeah, absolutely, this advice is in your best interest, and it unequivocally was not. But since they aren't actually a fiduciary, the client has no recourse. There's no consequences. And the problem with fiduciary with no consequences is eventually everybody calls themselves a fiduciary, including all the bad people, and then all the bad people do all the bad selling and drag everybody down with them.
So this is why this can be such a challenging topic, again, because listeners are maybe their brains are getting a little scrambled because we keep bouncing between fee only and fiduciary, again, as if they're synonymous, and they're not. They run in tandem. They're separate issues that run in tandem. The compensation, how you're compensated is separate from whether or not you are obligated to act in your client's best interest. But we do live in a world where I guess pretty much all fee-only advisors are also fiduciaries as part of their RIA, being in the advice business and therefore being a fiduciary. But there's a lot of crossover. But these really are terms that run in tandem.
And if we look at other professions, right, there are lawyers who get paid on a contingency fee. I will take your case. I will do the work. I only get paid if the case actually settles or we win. This is quite literally a commission share of the proceeds and settlement at the end of the case. So it's not that even other fiduciaries don't have some precedence around being compensated by commissions, but there are some distinctions. Lawyers have a whole lot more rules involved to actually determine what was an appropriate recommendation and what was not. B, there are more controls about the nature of how you can get compensated and the types of conflicts of interest you can introduce. So lawyers are allowed to get paid on contingency fees in certain situations, but there's a whole host of other back-end and shared payments that they are not permitted to have. So the rules are very specific about what kinds of, quote, commissions or back-end compensation you can get versus not. And the piece that ties to it as well is at the end of the day, the lawyers aren't literally selling third-party products. I mean, for better or worse, they're selling their advice and their services, for which the payment of that advice and service may be contingent on an outcome, but they're not actually selling and getting compensated for a third-party product in the same way that it is with financial services. And that's part of the challenge and why fee-only so commonly, I guess I would say, has become synonymous to fiduciary in our industry. It's just the recognition that in the real world as human beings, it's really hard for the nature of how you get paid to not start influencing what you do and who you work with. And we don't even necessarily realize it about ourselves, but it happens. It just tends to narrow the lens and the scope of what we're looking at.
So it's a good segue into sort of the next point that I had listed that I want to be sure we cover, and that is that conflicts of interest I think are actually the piece that we end up talking the most about, but we label it fee only and we label it fiduciary and we try to have this discussion. So for instance, a lot of advisors or a lot of prospective XYPN members will say, well, AUM isn't being fee only because AUM has lots of conflicts of interest. And so to break that down, by definition, AUM, assets under management, charging a percentage of assets is permissible as fee only. It is in the definition in the form of percentage-based fees. It is fine. You can charge AUM and be fee only. It's actually a major misconception that we see. Now, there are a lot of advisors out there in the fee-only community. I don't know how many, but there is a pretty big contingency that would prefer AUM be excluded from the definition of fee only because of the conflicts of interest that exist. Because it does have some conflicts of interest, which are, well documented. The most, common in our world would be, should your client pay off the mortgage or save the money into the brokerage account? Well, of course, if you're an AUM advisor, you have an incentive, you have a conflict of interest that, you're incentivized to get that or to get your client to save the money so that you can bill 1% of the assets instead of paying down the debt where you don't make any additional money. However, the conflict of interest that exists is where we start to address the fiduciary rules and that fiduciary commitment that you are obligated to make a recommendation in your client's best interest, whether or not it benefits you on the financial side. So fee-only advisors still deal with fiduciary conversations and fiduciary decisions and these conflicts of interest. AUM is the most commonly cited one, I believe. But every compensation model has conflicts. There is no conflict-free compensation model.
Not at all. But the nature of fiduciary rules, how we're watching them play out in the advisor realm, how they've played out in the accounting world, in the medical world, in the legal world, is we all have to acknowledge there are conflicts of interest. I mean, just the nature of any business relationship, any business transaction, ultimately has some level of conflict of interest. Like, I want you to part with some of your dollars, so you pay me for my service. I mean, whatever it is, lawyer, doctor, accountant, or insurance agent, broker, or investment advisor. Like we all have some level of conflict and just the desire to get paid for our services, whatever it is that we do. The acknowledgement in the fiduciary realm and what happens in kind of the messy reality of creating fiduciary laws and rules is you have to draw some lines about what are considered to be manageable conflicts of interest. They existed as a conflict, but we think it's something that a prudent expert can either manage and or be held accountable for, versus what conflicts are so untenable, are so conflicted that there's just too much likelihood that some people are going to persistently do it wrong and inappropriately. And not that they won't be held accountable for it, because if you're still subject to a fiduciary duty and you do the wrong thing, then you're still going to get in trouble. But if you're kind of setting yourself up in a world where you say like, hey, sure, you can sell any product with a 17% commission you want. We just expect you to do the right thing and be a fiduciary. You're kind of setting people up for failure, right? Like, because it's pretty hard to find any, investment where you take 17% of someone's upfront dollars and then it still comes out being the fiduciary recommendation. So that's sort of an extreme example, but it's to make the point that almost all fiduciary realms eventually have to acknowledge that some conflicts of interest are a conflict, but one you can probably manage. And some conflicts of interest are just so untenable, so difficult to manage that it's just better to not make them permissible. Because if you did, there's just going to be an overwhelming number of egregious fiduciary breaches anyways. And at some point, right, if I'm a legislator or I'm a regulator, like, my goal is not to enforce all of my rules and to punish a whole bunch of people. My goal is to make reasonable rules that most people don't breach in the first place, and then go after the few wrongdoers that still cross that line. So you want to set a line that is reasonable in the first place. And that's why fiduciary rules typically have limitations around them about what is permitted and what is not. And in our industry, the line effectively got drawn at commissions, upfront commissions, and not necessarily ongoing advisory fees, even though at the end of the day, you have to sell someone on investing a portfolio with you for which you're going to get paid ongoing compensation. It looks kind of like a levelized commission. And that's why many people in the pure fiduciary realm even think that AUM fees is a problem. But for better or worse, we decided that there are few enough conflicts of interest in level advisory fees to make them manageable, but there are more problems with the upfronts, which is why we end up seeing more limitations on commissions and kind of the whole shift towards fee only and fiduciary kind of becoming synonymous in our world, even though they're not really synonyms. They've just gotten formulated that way in practice.
So probably the most common objection that we get whenever we have new advisors looking at going out and starting their own firm or looking at joining XY Planning Network, and I used to deal with this when I was active at NAPFA and advisors looking to join NAPFA and be a part of that community, is the question, why can't I sell insurance? Because the only way I can be a true fiduciary to my client is if I help them in a holistic way. And holistic way includes selling them insurance, because I don't, maybe I don't want to send my clients to, 3 different insurance agents and have them hawk products on them, or I want to be able to do the transaction, or I did all the real work. I did all the heavy lifting. I did all the advice and the analysis. Why can't I also get paid the commission? I mean, someone's going to get paid the commission. It might as well be me because I did all the real work.
So to me, this is, I hate to say it, this is the quintessential example of how commissions introduce conflicts of interest that we don't even realize, and then we end up justifying and rationalizing to ourselves. And I'm not trying to be harsh here and throw anyone under the bus, but just think about this for a moment. We say this, I gave the advice on the insurance. I basically set up the recommendation. What's so wrong with being the one that follows through and implements it and gets paid? Because someone's got to get paid. So let's think about what else goes on in a client's life. So Alan, would you say if I was going to do an effective financial plan for someone that we should cover estate planning as part of the planning process, particularly if they've got kids?
Absolutely.
So would you give them, advice about the importance of why they need wills and maybe a revocable living trust and powers of attorney?
Yep.
And does it bother you at all that once you queue that up, you're going to send them to a lawyer who's not you, who's going to get paid to draft the legal documents?
Shockingly, no, it does not bother me.
Right? You queued that whole sale up, but you don't get paid, right? The lawyer gets paid. So do you cover tax planning as part of your work with clients?
I would say any advisor doing comprehensive financial planning is, yes.
Yeah, and you generally would advise that clients should be doing their annual tax returns as part of that process?
Yep.
How many advisors or CPAs doing tax prep? Now, there are actually a couple out there, but most of us—
5-10%.
Most of us are not, right? We queue up that annual tax preparation and all that tax planning work and all these tax strategies, and then we send it out to a CPA who gets paid. Do you have homeowners insurance and automobile insurance? Would you encourage clients to have homeowners and automobile insurance and all of their stuff?
Right. Yep.
Right. Kind of routine. Do you know any advisors who have a PNC license to sell it? After they queued it up, someone's got to get paid the commission.
I actually do not know any advisors selling PNC.
not one, right? Because that happens to not be the world that we're from. And to me, that's probably the most striking one. Frankly, when you look out there are more people that own homeowners insurance and automobile insurance than life insurance. And we recommend everybody has homeowners insurance and automobile insurance, and only some people to have life insurance, because sometimes you just don't actually have a life insurance need. Yet we're obsessed with, I queued up this sale and some other agent's going to get paid on it. Why can't I get paid on the life insurance? Even though it didn't bother me that I don't get paid on the homeowners insurance, I don't get paid on the automobile insurance, I don't get paid on the tax return, I don't get paid on the will, I don't get paid on the trust, I don't get paid on the power of attorney, I don't get paid on the real estate sale, even though I suggest they have a roof over their head. There are so many things that we give advice on, and then the client implements it with the people that are professionals in that domain. There's no reason you can't do the exact same thing with life insurance. Yes, you're going to queue up a recommendation the same way you do with homeowners insurance and auto insurance and a tax return and a will and a trust and real estate and a mortgage and all the other financial services products and financial advice products that are out there. But it bugs us about the insurance. And I think it bugs us about the insurance because I'd say this is the bias that comes through. I know the insurance. I have the license. I know how to do it. It would be so easy. I mean, I say this, I started as a life insurance agent. I still know how to write these things. The sale was big enough. I could go back and sit for that life and health exam anytime I want and reactivate that license. But it's not what you do when you're in the advice business, right?
You're hitting on it though, is that the dollars are so different. I mean, Mary and I recently went and got a revocable trust written. It was $3,000, which to me was like, oh my God, I got to write a $3,000 check. Right? I pay $600 for tax returns because of the business entities. I pay, a couple $100 a year for homeowners and that sort of thing. But if someone sells me a whole life insurance policy, they're going to make $20,000, $30,000 potentially. If they sell me a disability insurance policy, you're talking about tens of thousands of dollars worth of commission.
Well, the trails over time.
I think that's why it bugs
right?
us.
So it's a funny thing, right?
Like huge numbers.
The small commissions don't bug us. The big commission bugs us. That's how conflicts of interest work. I mean, it's the problem. Like it's a very subtle thing. And again, I'm not trying to pick on anyone that wants to do insurance business or does do insurance business or cast aspersions on your character, but just this obsession and focus that we have of holding on to the insurance business, even though we refer out every other financial services product, that's not a problem. This one product that we happen to know, already have experience with, and it pays the big dollars, becomes the one that we get so attached to. And that's the point. That's how conflicts of interest work. That's how they start messing with our heads a little in ways that we don't even realize. And we start explaining and rationalizing why we feel that we should still be participating in some commission, even though we're nominally wearing an advisor hat. And it's not about the insurance sale that you're doing that's absolutely right, because it may be, and a lot of people actually really do need insurance, and sometimes they actually need permanent insurance for business needs. I'm not trying to say at all that all insurance sales are bad, but there's always the risk that the big dollar starts to persuade you. And unfortunately, the bigger the dollars, the more sometimes we can get persuaded, and the more we tend to rationalize these things because big dollars do that. That's why it's such a good incentive for salespeople, because it works and it makes you want to go get the sale. But that's a problem when your primary role is to be an advisor and not a salesperson.
Yeah, and generally, the feedback or the pushback that I hear all the time, I'm sure you hear the same thing, is, well, I need to be there to see it from beginning to end because someone else out there is going to get this big check and they're going to take advantage of my client, which is a fair point. If I'm an advisor and I'm running analysis, I say you need a 30-year term life insurance, and I send them to a State Farm or an Allstate agent. Guess what? Do you really think that State Farm agent is going to go, oh, your fee-only advisor said you need a 30-year term life insurance policy? Let me run that quote. Absolutely not. They're going to try to sell them a bigger policy that's going to earn them more commission. So there are companies out there that have literally designed their entire business around this. Low Load Insurance Services, LLIS is one of them. John Ryan out of Denver. There are others that are popping up that are addressing this by allowing the fee-only advisor to actually stay involved in the process and to be sure that the client's not getting upsold or sort of a bait and switch type scenario. But I think the best way to describe, to sort of separate this, is the giving of advice and the transacting of the product. And the reason we care, the reason it matters, is because the moment you transact the product, the moment you begin to materially participate in a client's action, i.e. actually going out and buying the insurance, that's when the conflict of interest arises. The same way that clients come to us expecting advice. And that advice is what they should do. They don't necessarily want us compensated. And we don't want advisors compensated when a client actually takes action. Because when they take action, depending on the way that they implement, that's when the conflict arises. I mean, again, imagine a world where we're constantly trying to, upsell our clients on a revocable trust versus an irrevocable trust and an ILET, right? Whether or not they need it or not, we're going to earn a bunch more money by writing them a bunch more, documents. Then there's this unnecessary conflict. And the same one exists in the insurance. But again, some of us came from insurance backgrounds. Some of us just believe that we can do it better or just want to hold on to the process. But you can still hold on to the process without accepting a commission.
Well, and that's the thing. Like if you're concerned, like hey, I know my client needs some insurance and I want to get them queued up. And I'm afraid if they just go out there, they're going to get taken advantage by some life insurance agent that isn't scrupulous and doesn't follow the recommendation. Then go with the client to the meeting with the insurance agent and make sure it gets done properly. Like, there's no obligation on you as a fee-only advisor that says, hey, I'm only going to tell people what to do, and then I'm never going to actually help them get it done. Like, frankly, that's not a very good way to do it. If you're concerned about their ability to follow through and get the right thing done with the right insurance agent, then go with them to the meeting and represent the client very literally, right? Be the fiduciary on behalf of the client that is actually there to watch out for the client's best interests to make sure that the right thing gets done. And better yet, as an advisor, if you really want to be a good resource to your clients, go out there yourself, find insurance agents that you actually believe are the trustworthy, competent ones, because there are some very good ones out there. Go find trustworthy, competent insurance agents that you're comfortable with and refer your clients to that person so you know that the right job is going to get done. You know, from the XYPN network side, that's why we have a relationship with low load insurance, because we're comfortable that they actually do the right due diligence. They actually try to make the right recommendations to the client. They work productively with the advisor and don't try to undermine the advisor's recommendations, which will happen to you if it hasn't already in sending business out to some insurance agents. You know, these things happen. So as a good professional, find partners to work with that take care of your clients. And if you can't find a good partner, then go with your client and make sure that the right thing gets done. And that's a service to the client. You can charge for that. You can make that part of your service. You can charge separately for it if you need to. Go to the client and say, like, look, you really need this sizable insurance policy for the buy-sell agreement for your business. It's a multi-million-dollar decision for your business. It's absolutely crucial. But I just need to let you know that whoever implements this with you is going to make tens of thousands of dollars on the sale. So I think it would be a good idea for you to pay me for my time to go with you to those meetings and make sure it gets done properly, because I have this insurance background and expertise, if that's really where you come from. That's a valuable service. But the upshot is you get to sit on the client side of the table across from the insurance agent and actually be the fiduciary representing your client to make sure that the right thing gets done for them. That's valuable as well. That is something you can get paid for. It won't be the size of the insurance commission, perhaps, but that's part of the checks and balances of representing your client.
It's one of the reasons I've always had an affinity for low load, or LLIS now. I always forget they rebranded from low load insurance services to LLIS. But why I've always liked LLIS, and that is because if they were accused of upselling clients from term life to whole life insurance, their entire business model blows up. Because the only reason fee-only advisors use LLIS is because they only serve fee-only advisors and their clients. They don't have a retail business. They're not poaching business, and they're not trying to upsell. They implement recommendations. Now, they may come back to the advisor and say, like, hey, I'm wondering if you saw this thing, or we uncovered this thing that you need to know about, or whatnot. Just be sure the recommendation is correct. But they're not going to try to literally upsell your client, which you can, again, to your point, go out and interview and be sure that you're working with people that understand your business model and understand your recommendations and will actually implement on behalf of the client. There are two other pieces to this, not just whether or not you can be a fiduciary and whether or not you can be a good advisor and still sell insurance. One of the pieces is whether or not you can truly be enough of an expert in insurance policies to be selling your client insurance in a fiduciary manner. So let's just say that there is a whole world of no-load insurance policies, which don't currently exist in the US, but one day they'll be there. And that is, they're coming slowly. And actually, I was talking with an insurance broker recently, and they said, the truth is no-load insurance policies on term life is going to be like $1 a month cheaper, because the reality is that, whenever you take the upfront commission, you spread it over the course of the 30-year policy. It's actually not nearly as much in terms of monthly premiums as we think. That aside, let's just envision a world where nobody earns commission on insurance. Can you really be an expert in comprehensive financial planning and the behavioral change and communication with your clients, all things investments, because you're probably managing investments, And also all the things that all the insurance companies out there are doing. And the answer is no, you can't. You can't be an expert in all things. One of the big, reasons that I advocate for outsourcing insurance is outsource to the experts. Because the same way that I don't want to go write a will because I'm going to write maybe 2 or 3 a year, even if I went and got my JD and went to law school and all of that, I'm going to write a couple a year and I'm not going to see a lot of situations. The same is going to be true in insurance. I can't keep up with what a dozen different insurance companies are doing and new clauses and new things that they're issuing and changes that they're making. And what insurance brokers have told me they start to see is advisors will just focus on one company. That advisors that truly are hybrid that are issuing insurance they're just become experts in Guardian, and they only run quotes on Guardian because that's who they know. So then again, it opens this door of
it's human nature.
Absolutely. You get comfortable with that company, you like their policies, you like the underwriter, and suddenly, MetLife comes out with new policies that are better than Guardian's, but you don't bother looking at them because you don't have the time, because you're trying to be all things to your client. So I think expertise, even if you could do it in a fiduciary way, and even if you could write the insurance, is that I don't think you can call yourself a fiduciary and half-ass your work, right? Like you need to be an expert in what you're doing for your client, what they are paying you to do. And I don't think you can be a comprehensive financial planner and sell them insurance at the same time.
Yeah, at least not once you get beyond term insurance. The term side at least has kind of gotten simple and commoditized enough that maybe you can get close in keeping up on what's going on there, because there's not a lot that changes. Maybe some understanding around not just policies, but company ratings and convertibility, and I mean there's a little there, but not a ton. Maybe you can keep up with that, but once you get into the permanent side of the business, there's a whole lot of complexity and companies that are always issuing new products, which means maybe when that was your primary job and you were always getting product training meetings on the latest stuff, okay. But once you're out of that for a year or 2 or 3 or 5, because you're doing this comprehensive financial planning thing, that's the primary thing you get paid for, you can start getting rusty. You can start getting old on it and not knowing the policies. And suddenly you may not actually really be doing as much of a service for your client as you think. And even worse when you get into DI policies that have their own nuances that change, and long-term care insurance, which has its own nuances that change. Insurance is a realm that deserves and is entitled to its own dedicated expertise.
Absolutely. And I don't even think one insurance broker can't be an expert in all things disability and life insurance and long-term care, right? Like you better have a team of people for each of those sections, each of those types of insurance. The second issue that I see, or sort of argument that I push back on, is, again, even in this fiduciary insurance world, it's just the time. The time that it takes to actually issue an insurance policy is immense. And going through and collecting, getting the blood work done and collecting the medical records and working with the underwriter and all the back and forth that goes on, it's not a good use of your time, especially as a small RIA. If you're just getting started, your time needs to be spent out finding business and marketing and doing sales, not trying to chase down medical records from one of the doctors of one of your clients. Now, again, that's sort of the argument for why you shouldn't worry about it either way. And I know the dollar signs, can, it's basically like waving a red flag in front of a bull sometimes, where you're just like, look, especially when you're starting your business, you want that money coming in. But it all comes back to, our constant beating the niche drum and having a focus and being sure that you're focused on growing your business. Because if you allow yourself to get distracted in all of these different places, you're not going to be as successful growing your business, which, sort of leads into the final question that we get is, why does XYPN care? Why do we even care if our advisors are fiduciaries and whether or not they're fee only? Because both of those are, requirements to join XYPN. You have to sign a fiduciary oath to join, and you have to be fee only. Now, we do allow a transition period. Our advisors have a 12-month transition period to cut trails, if they have any, but they cannot sell any new products once they join XYPN. So I think it's fair in this conversation to address why it matters to us. And I think the first one, in terms of fiduciary, is really easy. We want to be able to say that our advisors are the best and most competent, but also the ones that are dedicated to serving in their client's best interest. I don't get a lot of pushback on that. Very few people, I don't think I've ever had anybody say, well, I don't want to sign a fiduciary oath because I think that's dumb. That one's easy. But that does prohibit non-fee only advisors from joining, right? Because I have this broker-dealer relationship, so I can't sign the form. I can't sign the fiduciary oath because, my broker-dealer compliance department would never allow that, which tells you everything you need to know about whether or not you can be with a BD.
I was going to say, it gets really informative right there. Like, just try going to your broker-dealer compliance department and asking them, can I sign an oath that I will be a fiduciary to my clients? And watch them say no. And it suddenly then it gets really clear about exactly the nature of broker-dealer relationships. A, that they won't sign off on that form, and B, that they have the power over you to say that you can't sign off on the form. Because at the end of the day, they are functionally sales organizations and you are a registered representative of them.
And we post those fiduciary oaths. All of our members that have a public profile, which means they are a CFP as well, as part of our membership requirements, their fiduciary oath is on their Find an Advisor profile. So a consumer can go and download that at any time. And that is our commitment, is that we can hold ourselves out and hold our group of advisors out and say they are fiduciaries 100% of the time. No caveats, no ifs, ands, or buts, nothing. They are fiduciaries. And that fiduciary oath is posted online. So if one of our advisors decides to go rogue and goes and grabs an insurance license and starts selling insurance, one of their clients could actually go pull this fiduciary oath where they said, no, you signed this when you joined XYPN and committed that you would be a fiduciary 100% of the time. That is what we actually really care about.
Because it creates true legal accountability, right? Like, it's not just saying fiduciary, it's you've actually put it out there. And if you don't do it, there's a piece of paper that your client and their attorney are going to use as the basis to sue you. And not that I actually hope that any of our advisors get sued at all. I hope none of them do. But the whole point of effective fiduciary advice and really embodying that term to your clients to act in their best interest is when you're willing to put your backing, your liability on the line to say, no, I'm actually willing to be personally liable for the quality of my advice.
And again, that's what we care about, right? Is that any consumer that comes to xyplanningnetwork.com and clicks on the Find an Advisor button is going to find an advisor that is committed to working in their best interest. And it ties in very heavily with fee only, right? Because we've now talked at length about the fact that it's pretty much impossible to not be fee only, to be fee and commission, and to also sign a fiduciary oath. But again, let's just envision a world where someone allows you to sign a fiduciary oath that your broker-dealer accidentally lets you sign it. I don't know. So you get to sign it, but you can still sell insurance. Why do we care about our advisors being fee only? Because fee-only advisors get a bad rap, right? We're the holier than thou. We're better than all those commission salesmen. And it's a brand that we have earned for ourselves because we've had a lot of folks sort of, taking a moral high ground because of their compensation structure, which I think is ridiculous. But the reason I would say I care, and Michael, you tell me what you think, but the reason I care about fee-only is because I do believe that there are wonderful advisors out there that are committed to working in their clients' best interests, that do primarily financial planning and also sell insurance. I believe that there are a lot of advisors out there that are doing great work that are probably fee only in of themselves, but someone else in their firm is selling insurance. And they're doing what's right, but they're underneath this umbrella that simply doesn't permit it. I know that you are out there, right? I know those advisors exist and they're doing great work, and I don't mean to ever discount what they do. The problem is, how do we know the difference between that advisor that's doing what's in their client's best interest, but occasionally sells insurance or has somebody else in their firm selling insurance? How do we determine the difference between that advisor and an advisor that's out there calling themselves a financial advisor, giving financial advice away for free to hawk the whole life insurance and rising premium disability insurance policies on young doctors that don't need it? Right? How do we tell the difference? And the truth is, we can't without like literally auditing the books of every single member that we have. I don't know of another line in the sand to truly be able to tell the difference between the quote unquote good guys and the bad guys when it comes to those that are transacting products, even if they could do it in a fiduciary way, which again, these are very tied together, but I don't know. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I'm very much in the same camp. So, I mean, here's how I think of it. Imagine for anyone out there that you know all the stuff that happens in the industry. You know the good, you know the bad. You've seen good advisors. You've seen what bad advisors and salespeople do. So you now need to give advice to your grandma or your mom or your deceased spouse after you're gone in a honey, I love you, here's the letter of what to do. And you've got to guide someone who knows nothing about financial advisors and financial services and all the rest about how to pick an advisor for themselves when you can't be there to make sure that they get a good one. And you have to give them guidance to figure out how they will actually get one of the good ones and not end out getting one of the bad ones. And you're not allowed to recommend someone you know because that person may not be around either. And when you just start thinking about, like, how would you tell a close, treasured loved one to pick an advisor and not get a bad one, not get one of the ones that we know are out there that do bad things driven entirely by the commissions, who are going to be hunting for your recently widowed spouse, because that's a business opportunity. I do literally know commission agents that built their business by reading obituaries. It does happen. So when you've got your grandma or your mom or your spouse and you're trying to tell them how to pick an advisor, knowing the predators will be coming for them, how do you tell them to find a good one or not? How do you do? Like, it's a really hard thing to figure out what advice you would actually give. Are you going to send them to a particular company? Are you going to send them to a particular website? What questions are you going to give them to ask that a good salesperson won't just bamboozle them with? Right? It gets really, really hard unless you just say, work with an advisor that can't sell you anything. Just work with an advisor that can't sell you anything. Work with a fee-only advisor that has a fiduciary obligation, CFP marks, and doesn't sell anything and gets no commissions, because it gets a lot simpler at that point. And not to say that they're still going to find a great, perfect advisor, but I know the harm is dramatically reduced and mitigated. They can't get, my grandma can't get someone who tries to sell her a 17% annuity commission because I'm going to send her to a fee-only advisor that can't sell a product. And so that to me becomes the reason why it matters and why fee-only was important to me as we were starting the XYPN network, because I take very seriously the obligation, the promise that we make to consumers when they come to the XY Planning Network website and we say, this is a place that you can find an advisor that will work with you as a Gen X and Gen Y client and give you real financial advice in your interests. Because, I got to stay up at night wondering whether all the people out there who told their friends, their family, their spouses, if I'm gone and you need to find an advisor, here's where you go. You go to the XY Planning Network website. I don't want to be up at night wondering, all right, well, we got a whole bunch of people, and I think the ones who sell commissions at XYPN are good, but I don't know. I don't know whether the commissions have tempted them. I don't know whether maybe they started out well, but then they hit a tough spot in their business and they decided to convince themselves that it was worth selling this one high commission policy just because they just had to get over the income hump this month. And all the conflicts that start cropping up when the dollars are big. And we know the conflicts are there because we just spent half an hour talking about why it's so tempting to sell insurance when you already know it because it's so valuable and the commissions are so big. And so that obligation, that sacred duty that we have when we put that XY Planning Network website out there and say, this is a place to find a real advisor who will take care of you. We're still not going to be perfect, unfortunately. At some point, some not so good advisors are going to find their way into the network. But that's why we screen every application against broker check and IAPD. If you have regulatory infractions, we don't allow you in XY Planning Network. It's actually not something that we market and broadcast very much, but we actually screen every single application and we deny any application with material history of infractions. We won't let them into XY Planning Network. That's why we require fee only. That's why we require the CFP marks if you want to be listed on our website and actually hold out as an XYPN advisor. And that's why we require fee only and a fiduciary oath. We can't guarantee every advisor is going to be perfect, but we can try to stack the deck as favorably as possible for every consumer that comes to the website by minimizing the conflicts of interest, by being fee only, by requiring the fiduciary oaths so everyone is really clear about the accountability. If someone doesn't do what they're supposed to, there are actual legal consequences. And we think those are really important things for protecting consumers and actually trying to create, an entire network that's in the client's best interest of all the clients that may find their way to XY Planning Network. And it's not that there might not be some non-CFPs who give good advice, and there might be some commission-based advisors who give good advice. It's that it's so challenging with limited information to figure out who's the legit one and who's not, that the safest thing we found we could do for consumers is just draw some lines. And unfortunately, a few good people end on the wrong side of the line, but we're trying to make sure that the odds are overwhelmingly good that everybody that's on the other side of the line is actually there to give good advice for clients.
Yeah, because those lines are CFP, fee only, fiduciary oath is signed. And that's what it takes to be listed on our website.
And a clean regulatory history just to even get in. If you already have a history,
you just opened a can of worms with that one. Just to clarify, the requirement and the requirement is that you can have no infractions on your record of fines of more than $10,000. And the reason for that is because some industry studies came out that showed that people with fines over $10,000 tend to be repeat offenders. Not a lot of one-time offenders. You tend to have people that bounce around to different companies and continue to do the same things that they were doing the first time around. And so you're much more likely to be a repeat offender than folks doing it the first time, basically.
Fines, settlements, or damages.
Just to clarify that piece. It is we've had it in place for maybe a year now. It's another piece there. But, I guess as we're coming to a close, I will say that, another piece of pushback that we've gotten is, hey, we don't like the CFP's definition of fee only. They've read the Kitces.com blog. They know Michael's not the biggest fan of the CFP board's definition of fee only and some of the things that they did. Why don't you just create your own definition? And my answer is twofold. One, you have to have a CFP in XY Planning Network to be listed on the Find an Advisor profile, which means you have the CFP. And if I put on the website that you are fee only and a CFP, and we have a different definition than the CFP board, and you are in conflict with the CFP board's definition, you could lose your license, for one. I mean, that's just an easy one.
You can lose the CFP marks. Like we don't want to set people up for. I mean, not even just that you lose your marks, but when CFP board takes your marks, they issue a press release that they've taken your marks. So that's going to be in a Google search forever.
And it will show up high in Google search. So that's one piece. And two, we didn't want to confuse consumers, because while we think the CFP board's definition can be improved, it's not totally busted. And that is one thing, is that the CFP board earlier this year did do a release of some new ideas that they're having around the definition of fee only, which will actually, in a way, the way it was written, it would broaden and allow more people to be considered fee only. Not a lot, but it would open up the doors a little bit to some folks that are in these sort of strange situations.
They clarified related parties and family members a little bit more. They kind of reframed the whole nature of sales-related compensation and what it is. And I sent an entire comment letter to the CFP board. We'll include it in the show notes if anybody wants to go and read it. All of it's like 7,000 word glory. We're trying to be very active on this to come up with, frankly, just a better and cleaner definition. Because I do think there were while there was a lot of good things around the existing fee-only definition, and it did capture a lot of things that it was meant to capture, it scooped up some stuff that it really, really shouldn't have and made some ambiguities that I don't think needed to be there. So, we wrote I think CFP board's new definitions are improving it. We gave some suggestions about how to improve it further, including, what I think actually is one of the biggest ones that I know we still see regularly with XY Planning Network, which is that being fee only doesn't just mean that you don't get any commissions going forward. It means you can't get any commission trails from the past either, because a commission trail is still a commission. And The problem to me with around that for a long time is, I get the nature of the upfront commission and the conflicts that it introduces and part of why we support fee only. But commission trails, just in practice in the real world, they're effectively servicing fees. The 12B1 fee actually has a portion that's called the levelized commission and another portion that's called the servicing fee. The 25 basis point 12B1 fee is literally written out to be a servicing fee. It's functionally a commission because it routes through a broker-dealer, which is a commission-based sales organization, but it's meant to be a servicing fee. And there are lots of insurance trails that are essentially servicing fees. And CFP board's definition for fee only right now says if you want to go fee only, not only do you have to not earn new commissions going forward, but you have to get rid of all the old trails. So you either have to walk away from them or you can sell them. There are actually other advisors and groups out there that will buy your commission trails. But you have to terminate the trails, which also means you terminate yourself from being broker of record or agent of record on the client's existing annuity and insurance policies, which you might not want to lose control of because you're actually still working with the client. And so we even put forth a suggestion in the comment letter to the CFP board that they should really consider adjusting the fee only definition to recognize that servicing commission trails from old business is just good service for clients. It doesn't have the conflicts that are involved in selling brand new policies with very front-loaded commission, where at least there's a greater risk of conflicts. So we'll see if the CFP board adjusts its views on that as well. They may be coming forth with either an amended version of the proposal or might even put out something for a second comment period. We'll see what happens. But we're well aware of some of the challenges on that side as well. I still remember when I left the broker-dealer side and went to the fee-only side, I had a calendar where I counted down the 2-year window until my old Series 7 and 66 licenses lapsed. So I understand the challenge and the fear that goes on with that transition, and we're hoping CFP board will make it a little bit easier on that, and for people who are making the transition to not need to walk away from clients that they're already working with and servicing. But the rules say no commissions of any sort, and because we don't want to set members up in a situation where we say they're fee only, but CFP board doesn't, and then they get their marks revoked in a public action, we kind of feel compelled to stay aligned to the CFP board's rules and just participate in the rulemaking and public comment process to try to get them to adjust to something that is, I think, better reflective of the advice world today.
Yeah, and to be fair, NAPFA, who created fee only, adjusted their definition to match the CFP board and affected about 10% of their membership, they said, were caught up in sort of this overlap. The big difference was NAPFA used to allow you to have a very minor interest in trust, because some trust companies won't let you use them unless you are like partial owner, and it's a minuscule percentage.
Right. You could own a 2% share of some commission-based organization or entity, and the decision was like, well, a 2% ownership interest is so nominal that it probably doesn't amount to a material conflict. Like, you couldn't get a direct commission, but you could own 2% of a commission entity and not call it a related party. Whereas CFP board, when they came out with their rules, said, no, anything greater than 0% is a related party. And that threw off a non-trivial number of NAPFA members that had some less than 2%, but more than 0% interest. Yeah,
like I said, that's where I heard the most complaints was around, like, certain trust companies require ownership in some way. Anyway, well, hopefully this clarifies just sort of our views on the world of fee only and fiduciary and why it matters to us and why it matters to XY Planning Network and why, again, just sort of why we push back and we'll just say our sort of talking points for why we view fee only as, honestly, it's the direction the industry is moving and why advisors can start pushing their businesses that direction if they're not there already. But again, I know these are objections that we hear quite frequently from some advisors that are looking to join, but sort of have a different view on some of the things than we do. So we just want to take the opportunity to sort of clarify. So Michael, thanks so much for taking an hour and almost a half. So I thought this was going to be a shorter episode, but not.
My pleasure. As usual, the Kitces episodes are never the short ones.
They did go a little longer. So I thought this was going to be something, you always think like, it's fee only. We can talk about this in 20 minutes. Not quite. So anyway, thanks for taking the time to come back on the show.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Be sure to join our VIP community at xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP to hang out with other XYPN radio listeners, ask questions for future mailbag episodes with myself and Kitces, and to finally find a community of like-minded financial advisors. Thanks so much for joining me today. We'll see you next time.
You're not alone, and you're not crazy. It's scary starting, building, and growing your own financial planning firm. And that's why we put together a free private community just for you, the Cutting Edge Financial Planner. Go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP or text XYPN Radio to 33344 and join a network of thousands ready to change the lives of Gen X and Gen Y clients.